Squishies. Welcome back to another vlog. This is Dirty Pair, episode 19. And as usual, Dirty Pair, I cannot remember the title. This is a funny episode to talk about, actually, because on the one hand, so there have been episodes of shows in the past where I've been, or movies or whatever, where I've been like, I want to like this, but, and then there's problems. This is the first time I can recall that I've hit the opposite. I want to dislike this, but I can't. It's just too charming. So I think what I'm going to do is get into why I don't like it, or why I want to not like it, and then kind of try to redemptive read myself into convincing myself that it's okay to like it. So, my issue with this episode is Riemann. He, like, when the episode first started, I was like, okay, here's a guy who is quote-unquote in love with a doll. This is someone who doesn't, this is someone who doesn't want a relationship with another person. They want an object. They want something under their control, something that doesn't get to object. And it's a fairly common motif in literature and fantasy in particular, it's the Sleeping Beauty. It's the woman who can't say no. And that's a dangerous thing, that our culture has so much of that. First, it perpetuates the idea that men ask and women say yes or no. Which it should be both and neither. It should be mutual consent to something mutually desired. But that's what this is about. It's about it's about entitlement and laziness. It's about a man who doesn't want to deal with having to actually, find someone who is interested in him and get consent. He just feels entitled to have it. And so the fantasy is of a woman who in some way can't say no, because she's a doll, or a statue, or dependent in some way, or unconscious. And right there we hit the line where this is starting to shade really quickly into rape country. Because, of course, that's where masculine feeling of entitlement to women leads, is rape culture. So when the episode first started, like in that first scene, and when they were first, Raymond was first calling in the Dirty Pair and all of that, I was like, okay, that's the direction this is going. And it seemed like the episode was being critical of him, which I liked, but then it got weird, because then I was like, no, actually, it's not that he dislikes women or prefers a woman who can't talk back, it's that he is physically incapable of being anywhere near a woman. Which seems like the episode trying to make excuses, because this is still fiction, this is still a fictionally created character. It's like, oh, no, this is different, because this guy actually can't. And he's still entitled, but he can't, so he needs to, and no, if you can't, you can't, but you're not entitled to anything. it's on you. And it just, especially in anime fandom as it's developed over the past, 30 some years since this episode was made, it's just really uncomfortable because there is this phenomenon of, men who quote unquote prefer two-dimensional women, or, they would rather have their body pillows or their dolls or their, dating sim characters, which is not to say that there's anything inherently wrong with having or liking dolls, or liking dating sims, or, liking fictional characters. The problem is when they become substitutes for real women because they can't say no. When the fear of rejection, which is a natural thing and pretty universal, I think, becomes a sense of entitlement. That's when it crosses the line. But that's where I think kind of redemptive reading comes in, because this episode is also doing some really interesting stuff structurally right from the start. We're presented with kind of two stories. There's this kind of gothic romance with the man who's a little maybe creepy, and his, the woman who's by his side in a, kind of servant-ish position, and the creepy old manor house, and, that feels very gothic romance, as well as gothic horror, because those genres share a common origin. But then you're cutting back and forth at the beginning of the episode between that and massive space battle Dirty Pair. And then literally the Dirty Pair's ship crashes into this mansion and disrupts the gothic romance. So that's kind of the role that Kay and Yuri are playing in this episode. Like, they're deliberately playing the role of the women trying and failing to persuade him to come out of his shell and join real women, while there's actually a real woman who's been there all along, and who he naturally ends up with. Because of course he does. That's how these stories go. That's how the gothic romance goes. So it's almost like Dirty Pair is an intrusion into this gothic romance, and in that sense I think we have to read the comments at the beginning where the Dirty Pair are speaking very negatively about a man who, out of misogyny, not just the Dirty Pair but their chief as well, are speaking very negatively about a man who, out of misogyny, and they don't really shy away from saying that he detests women, and so turns to a doll. That they respond to that as being creepy and bizarre and a problem that needs to be fixed. And it's the gothic romance that they've crashed into that is depicting it as, in some sense, romantic. Still creepy. But, like so many gothic romances, it's about the kind of terrible human being that becomes better by falling in love with the woman who's been there all along. In that respect, it's less Sleeping Beauty and more Beauty and the Beast. But even more than that, it's, every, Bronte and Austen book ever written. And in that respect, then, it's not giving him a pass for his quote-unquote allergy, because it's showing that if he really wanted to, he could overcome the allergy. And then the only problem, really, is that it depicts it as being kind of on the woman to get the man to feel that it's worth it to come to her when Mafalda saves his life. And I'm not a huge fan of that either. At the same time, though, you can read that as being part of just the Gothic romance that's playing out, and hence implicitly also being criticized, just as Kay and Yuri are crashing into and criticizing all the other elements of the Gothic romance. So in that respect, actually, I think I kind of succeeded in convincing myself to like this episode. Or to, rather, not feel bad about liking this episode. This is actually kind of brilliant. And it's been a long time since I felt like Dirty Pair has been firing on all cylinders like it did in this episode, so I'm actually really happy at being able to find this redemptive read. Especially because there's also kind of a personal selfish reason for wanting to like it, which is on the strictly diegetic level where we accept the nonsense about him being physically allergic to women, which makes no sense at all. And in fact, makes most sense as a psychosomatic thing rooted in pretty much misogyny. But let's take it as a physical thing. Then the question is, why is Mafalda not setting it off? And we can say power of love, but if we're treating it as a physical thing, then there has to be a physical difference. Some way in which Mafalda is physically different to all the other women he's ever encountered. And oh hey, back in episode 8, we found out that for most people in this setting, being trans is no big deal. It's just a completely accepted thing, with very few people who have an issue with it. You know, having an issue with it is seen as kind of like old-fashioned in a gross way, you know, regressive. So hey, now we have a second episode with a trans woman in it. Because that's what I'm choosing to read Mafalda as. And for obvious selfish reasons, I am a big fan of that. It's actually kind of funny to me because I used to get a lot of hate comments because a couple of my very early videos were in a cringe compilation. And that's basically an open invitation for people to come and tell you that, you know, you should die. Because internet. I'm not going to give that excuse. Internet isn't the reason. Because toxic masculinity and Nazis, okay? That's why it's accepted. Because fucking 4chan. Okay? Okay. That out of the way. People used to leave them. They don't really do it anymore. Every once in a while one will show up, but it's really rare. And occasionally they would go to other videos besides those too. And one of them commented on my video about Dirty Pair episode 8 that it was, I think the word they used was creepy or disturbing, something in that general vicinity, to see a man getting so excited about a trans woman. Which in hindsight, I wish I'd left that comment up because it is hilarious. Because at the time I made that video, I still didn't know I was a trans woman. And going back and watching it, it's blatantly obvious that I am. Which is just really funny to me. And, you know, really makes me kind of love that episode even more. It's already like one of my favorite single episodes of any anime ever, and that just makes me love it more. That's about it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Patreon for early access to videos, essays, and more. And yeah. Bye!